Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the last session of our mini course, The Saint, the Queen, and the Joker, a brief introduction to Sephardic folklore, taught by the Aresti visiting scholar, Dr. Ron Lasry. You already know the drill, but let me reiterate the format of the program. You are all muted. If you want to ask a question, please type it into the chat. And this is your opportunity to ask all those things that you are curious about medieval Sephardic folklore that you didn't ask before. So please go ahead and do that. I will moderate the chat and pose questions to Dr. Lasry in the middle of the lesson and then at the end. The mini course is being recorded. The other two sessions, the first two sessions are already up on the Bildner Center's website, and this third session will be up in a few days. I want to make a note to you that all of the public programs that we have done this fall and spring are recorded, so you can look up past events and see and listen to the recordings of other mini courses as well as public programs that were done virtually. I will introduce Dr. Ron Lasry again, but briefly, and then we will move on. And I don't think I need any introductions. You know, I'm Professor Nancy Sinkoff, the Academic Director of the Bildner Center and Professor of Jewish Studies and History. Dr. Ron Lasry is the Jerome and Lorraine Aresti Visiting Scholar, and he is a specialist in Sephardic literature and classical rabbinic literature. His research is particularly engaged with the narrative histories, folkloristic histories of Sephardic Jewry before and then after the expulsion and conversion. And he is particularly interested in how literary analysis, that coming out of a literature field, illuminates the understanding of the cultural history of Sephardic Jewry. He received his doctorate at Ben Gurion University, is working on transforming his dissertation into a book, and has already published articles on the dissertation on rival Sephardic interpretations in the journal Jewish Quarterly Review, which is extremely important, one of the most venerable journals of Jewish studies in English. Tonight's topic is again, the Saint, the Queen, and the Joker, but today we're going to learn about the Joker. We already learned about the Queen and the tzaddik, or the saint. So please welcome again to our virtual classroom, Dr. Ron Lasry. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Professor Sinkoff. I'm very glad to be here today. I will share my presentation and we shall immediately begin. Okay, as you said, we already talked about our queen, we already talked about our saint, and today we're going to talk about our joker, Djoha, or Djoha, the fool and the trickster. What are we going to do today? Today we're going to finish our 3-session course. We'll try to figure out this image of the Joker that has at least 2 faces and is very, very popular in world literature. So we'll go through some of the world literature manifestations or some examples of Jokers. We'll go through the arena of Djoha and several names that are very similar to his name and are indicating different areas in which stories about Djoha are being told. And then we will focus at the Sephardic arena, and we'll talk about Sephardic stories about Djoha, and we will try to figure out what is his story. And let me tell you just that it is not just one story. And this time we're going to read together or listen to many stories or more stories that we are used to. And I think that it might be fun. I'm not sure, each time that I teach about Djoha, I'm not very sure how funny it is. And now you're on Zoom, so I cannot really hear you laugh. So I would really appreciate your sincere opinion. I really want to know if these stories are making you laugh or not, because Many people like them, and some do not like them at all, in the sense that they can be funny, they can be not funny, and this is maybe something to tell about folk stories. Usually, folk stories, we see folk stories today as texts. Texts, stories that are printed on pages. But actually, stories were very live. They were including live performance, and they were including a very vibrant atmosphere. A mother telling a story to her child, a father is telling a story to all of the family, and these things are used to be very alive and very vibrant. And now we are facing these texts, and maybe some of the performance is lost when we are only witnessing texts. So let's begin. So, of course, today we're going to talk about the Joker. And in order to understand the figure of the Joker, I would like to begin by saying that the Joker is, or the fool, is a very common figure in world literature. All around the world, we have fools. All around the world, we have jokers and tricksters. And we will delay on each one of these, fool, joker, trickster. Each one of these words is going to be interpreted more widely. But when we are talking about joker, I think, or about a fool, these are also synonyms. Fool, joker, these synonyms. So when we're talking about it as a world, as a phenomenon that happens in the world, and as a figure that is common to many cultures, we're also talking about a main thing in folklore. Sometimes a folklore is quite identical in many different places. For instance, we already said that Cinderella has more than 1,000 versions. And because of that, we must also realize that each society needs its fool. And I want to think, what is the need that we have in the figure of the fool? So one of the better known fools in classic literature is King Lear's fool. King Lear is, of course, the king, and the fool is walking beside him. He is always in connection with the king, or he has many points of connection, and in one certain point, in more than one certain point, he also calling the king a fool. And King Lear is asking me, "Are you calling me a fool, boy?" And this, I really love this moment, because the fool can be a mirror. You can really differentiate between the king and the fool. They appear to be very different people because of their very different place in society. But in fact, the figure of the fool is very humanistic, and it destabilizes some dichotomies between upper level society and when I try to talk about upper and lower levels of society, my face goes just, I do funny faces because I don't like even talking about it. But when we're talking about the king, he says he's supposed to be the supreme man, he's the highest, and the fool should be one of the lowest. And when the fool is actually calling King Lear a fool, and King Lear is understanding that, and he's asking, "Are you calling me a fool?" This is a point in which we can see the fool as a mirror that reflects something about human nature, about the human profile of King Lear as a Shakespearean character. And this is one thing that we can know about fools. Let's see two more examples. One is Don Quixote. Don Quixote by Miguel Cervantes has Sancho Panza. Sancho Panza goes with him. And look at this picture. they are both riding on, one is riding a horse and one is riding a donkey, and they look very different in terms of style. But when you read Don Quixote, you realize that the real fool is, well, Don Quixote himself. The knight is crazy, and the fool is clear and very wise. And in that sense, we can see these images shift between the wise and the clear and the fool. And it is not always in accordance to hierarchy that we could have expected. And this is a very nice character because of that. It illuminates human nature in a very diverse manner. And I really like Yaroslav Hasek, The Good Soldier Schweik. It's a great piece of work. And one of the things that I really like about it is that when the good soldier Schweik he is a soldier in the First World War, and is from the Austrian-Hungarian army. And when you read, you do not really grasp at the beginning if he is a fool or the most sophisticated person that you have ever met. And he's always walking on the opposite direction to the borderline. He's always walking towards the rear end, or the rear front, and is distancing himself from the front lines. And when he does so, you don't really understand if he has like a bad sense of orientation or that he's really fleeing from the war. But when you get to really know him, you understand that he does so intentionally. Each one of the commanders that he meets tells him, "Hey, you soldier, you're in the complete wrong direction. The war is over there." He says, "The war is over there. Okay, so let's go over there." And as soon as he can, he goes back to the opposite direction, because, you know, war is not the purpose or the best place for a wise man. Maybe it is the place for fools, but maybe sometimes, you know, I once, as an Israeli, it is difficult for me to speak about wars as completely foolish, but it is mostly foolish. Okay, so we see that this character is quite diverse. And we see that it appears in early modernity, in the 16th century, but also in the 20th century. And it is really a thing that we know, a character that really is essential to our world. And sometimes it can serve as a mirror or a reflection. And other times it may serve as protest, okay? Schweik is protesting against the war, and he also doesn't want to die, so he's going on the opposite direction. And in this way, the fool is really useful, a useful tool for understanding things about society, about people, about human nature, about what is right and what is wrong, and what is lucid and what is blurry. And this is a thing that we can keep in mind while talking about our Sephardic fool, Djoha. So when we're talking about Djoha, we can also talk about Djoha. It depends if we're talking Turkish or Arabic. We're not talking neither now, but the pronunciation changes. We can also talk about Hoja or Hoja, okay? And Hoja, Nasraddin Hoja. And we have different names, and they are quite different people, but the origins of the name Djoha are not known. It's unclear. We see a first appearance of this name in manuscripts from the 9th century in Arabic, and we can see that it is sometimes he's a philosopher, sometimes he's a fool. But we know that there is a Turkish tradition that there was indeed a person named Nasraddin Hoja, and he lived in Turkey, and people are claiming that they have the place in which that they have a mausoleum in the exact place where his grave stays. And that's at Ashkir, sorry, Akshir. It's in Turkish, and I do not know Turkish. Akshir, it is in Turkey, where the red symbol is. And look at this figure. I want you to look at it even bigger because it is interesting. You can see that Hoja, Nasruddin Hoja, is walking, he's riding a donkey, right? But he's the other way around. He is riding when he's fronting the S of the S. Okay, he's riding on the opposite direction, and this is a thing that we'll talk about later on. I just didn't want you to miss this thing because I like him. He makes me fun, laugh. He's nice. He's nice, and I like it's a really nice thing to make such a big statue in the place where you hold his grave, and to make this statue, which is, are you mocking him? Are you saving his memory? Is it a monument? Is it a caricature? It's playing with the way that we're used to think, and I really like it. So sometimes we can really see this is in Uzbekistan at Bukhara. We can see just Djoha as a person, which is he's laughing, he's smiling, but he doesn't look like the complete fool in this statue. But we can really see that Djoha and the donkey are quite good friends, and the donkey, we'll talk about it soon, is quite similar sometimes to Djoha, because Djoha sometimes acts as a donkey himself, but this figure is really well known. Hoja, Djoha, Nasruddin Hoja. We're talking about the Middle East. We're talking about the Mediterranean Sea, Arabian countries, and the Near East as well. It is really large portion we have also in China, I think, Nasruddin Hoja. And we're talking about really large geographical presence of this figure. And we can see even this is a book from Italy that teaches people, young kids, how to read while reading stories about Djoha. It's also connected to European tradition as well, mostly around the Mediterranean basin. So, what stories are we going to discuss today? Today we are going to discuss stories about Djoha that are connected to Sephardic folklore. That means that they had been told by Sephardic people and had been documented in the works of Matilda Cohen Serrano, which is a very important figure in Sephardic culture. And one of the things that she did is going and collecting stories from people that told her these stories, and she wrote them down and published a collection of it, an anthology of it in Hebrew and in English. And we have a translation by Professor Tamar Alexander as well, because she's one of the only researchers that really dealt with the character of Djoha, of Sephardic Djoha. And this is our corpus. The Sephardic tales of Djoha. This is only a part of the stories on Djoha. When I looked at books on Djoha, I found books in Persian and in Arabic and in Turkish and in French. Okay, you have so many stories about Djoha. I cannot grasp Italian as well. I cannot say that I can Yugoslavian languages, Serbo-Croatian. So I won't say that I'm going to talk about Djoha as a whole. I'm going to talk about the Sephardic Djoha. This is, after all, a brief introduction to Sephardic folklore. So this is our Djoha. And when we are talking about our Djoha, we can also talk about our sea, okay? The Mediterranean Sea. And when I took the corpus of stories that Matilda Cohen Serrano collected, and when I took, when Professor Tamar Alexander is describing the places from which these stories are arriving, I placed a little Djoha, okay, in each place. And these little Djohas are really circulating around the Mediterranean basin. And this is a Mediterranean Sephardic character, and we can go back to the map of the expulsion from Spain. It would be quite similar. We can go back to other maps that we saw. This is the main center of Sephardic culture, and this is our world today. Okay, I promised many stories. This is the first of which. One day, Djoha's mother told him, Djoha, go and buy me 2 liters of milk. So he goes and buys her 2 liters of milk. When he comes back, he have only 1 bottle of milk. Djoha, I asked for 2 liters of milk. What happened to the second one? Where is the second one? It broke, mother. How? The mother asks. Like this. And he breaks the bottle exactly like this. Okay. So when we're talking about Djoha, we're talking about an absurd. He's constantly, he's doing things that we wouldn't expect. And when we are talking about humor, and the vast majority of the stories about Djoha are humoristics. And when we are talking about humor, one of the theories concerning humor, and there are many theories about that, I'm not saying that I'm covering all of this subject, but one theory is that humor is dealing with expectations and breaking these expectations. We did not expect Djoha to break the second bottle of milk. This is the one thing that a child goes and buys 2 bottles of milk, and one falls. It happens. We can sympathize with that. But breaking this bottle of water right in front of his mother, this is a surprise, and this creates the humoristic effect as well. So this is a first story, and we can really see how Djoha is connected to everyday life of Sephardic folk culture. He's going to buy milk, and he's going to buy, we'll see him going to the butcher, and he'll go to fix a coat, and he's living his very simple life. And when you're reading about these stories, you can also understand the community. They don't have a lot of money. Djoha is poor, and there are stories about fleas, and stories about lice, and stories about cockroaches. They're not living in a very sterile environment. It appears that these stories are also describing a somewhat poor experience of life. Okay, let's go ahead. I just wanted to say that I said these things about the ways in which Djoha is relating to everyday life of Sephardic Jewry, in order to reflect that this fool is also reflecting economical background, economical or social harshness, or social difficulties, the economical difficulties of these communities. Okay. Now, Djoha's mother is asking him, Djoha, go and buy me a pack of matches. But Djoha, I want you to make sure that all of the matches are good. Okay? Okay. So Djoha goes and he buys matches, and he buys this, and he goes and he buys this pack of matches. He pays, and he takes it out, and he takes one out, and he lights a match. He sees that it works perfectly fine. He puts it in, takes another one. Yeah, great, it's working. Putting it in, and there, all the way home, he's lighting all of the matches and putting them back in when they're already used. And when he arrives to his mother, here's the package of matches. And his mother takes the matches, opens the box, and Djoha, he fooled you. The grocery man fooled you. These are all not good. No, mother, believe me. I checked them. They were all good. I checked one by one. All of them were good. Okay, so this is another kind of story which repeats, kind of the same formula. Djoha is unable to understand simple instructions, and his understandings are very literal. In one instance, he's going to the butcher, and his mother tells him, please see if the butcher has cow legs. Okay, so he goes and he goes behind the counter in order to pick and to see if the butcher's legs are actually the legs of a cow. So this is not the legs of a butcher, but this Djoha, he really understands things in a twisted thing, and this evokes laughter, and also it makes us think, why is it so funny to laugh about the person that does not get it? Why it is so funny to laugh about the fool? What does it reflect? And I don't have many answers to this. There are many answers. I don't want to go into this in depth, but I just want to say, let's keep this in mind. And if you have good ideas about it, I would gladly hear them. Okay, so we said that Djoha is connected with the donkey, and the donkey is sometimes telling us about Djoha. It is as if Djoha is dumb as a donkey, and because of that, he's always riding a donkey, or many times he rides a donkey. And sometimes these stories tells us how fool Djoha is, and sometimes they tell us things about the society. For instance, there is a story about Djoha and his father. This story is very popular in Arabic, and you can look it online and you find many people telling this story. One time Djoha and his father are going with the donkey, and they're going to the market. They rise early and they go to the market, and then a person sees them and tells them, you are both walking on foot, and the donkey is going with you. Use the donkey. One of you can ride the donkey. Okay, so they go on, and the father goes on the donkey, and they keep on riding. And then another man meets them and says, your young son is walking by foot, and you're riding a donkey. This is not nice. Let your son ride the donkey. So they switch. And the boy goes on the donkey. Of course, minutes later, they see that the young man is riding the donkey, and they tell him, aren't you ashamed that your father is going by foot and you're riding the donkey? This is unacceptable. So he gets off the donkey, and then both of them are taking the donkey on their shoulders, and Djoha is telling his father, why are we doing this foolish thing? And his father tells him, if we'll listen to the society all the time, and if we will try to make people happy all the time, we won't be happy ourselves. Let's do whatever we think is fitting and right. And you see how the fool can also be like a mirror, not for the foolishness of the fool, but also for how to handle society. Okay, so one time they asked Djoha, how many donkeys do you have? Okay, another story. So we say, okay, let me check, and I'll 1, 2, 3. Okay, he goes back. Look, 9 donkeys were standing in line, and I counted them, but one donkey kept on moving from one side to the another. Him, I couldn't count. Okay, so sometimes Djoha himself is as stupid as a donkey, and sometimes he is clever, and you see that this characterization changes constantly. Let's hear this story as well. The second, born merchant. The teacher asks Djoha in class 5 eggs at 20 cents each one. How much is that? And Djoha replies, 60 cents. No. 70. No. I won't go any higher than 90. Okay? And when you're reading this story, you see that he's not answering the question. He knows the answer, but he's not willing to pay 100. So he's trying to pay the price that he wants to pay. He negotiates. And then you can see that occasionally it appears that he's only playing the fool. Sometimes it is easy for him to play the fool because a fool does not need to. Sometimes a fool have its advantages. Okay, I'm going to stop now, and I'm going to ask you if you have any question at this point of time. Maybe Professor Simkov.
I'm back. I don't know. I don't see my picture yet. I must be back. There I am. Thank you. So we have a couple of questions. This material, I was laughing. You couldn't hear me. I was laughing. So I think we have a couple of comments and questions, and then, you know, I just feel nostalgic already that we don't get to hear more of these stories, Ron. I really, really do. Okay, so what?
We'll hear more stories.
No, but you know, I'm looking at we have half an hour with you. Okay, yeah. So someone asked, is the phrase Mahu Omer in the title of the Djoha book referencing that phrase in the Haggadah, in the Pesach Haggadah? I
think so, yeah, because this is another kind of Chacham, Rasha, Tam, okay? And the one that cannot ask, right, does not know how to ask a question. Right. And this is kind of typical characters, yes, the things that... So actually what you're saying is very important, because this is one of my little, not peeves, but, you know, Jewish culture today has this perception that traditional Jewish culture was always sober and had no humor, and, you know, is strict like Ashkenazic piety. And anyone who studies, as you are an expert, of course, in the corpus of rabbinic literature and in Sephardic literature, there's punning, there are word plays, there's jokes, there's expletives, there's, you know, outrageous statements. And, you know, thinking about Haggadah, we're actually coming up for Passover. So in this context, I think I can say that, you know, the 4 sons or the 4 children, there's a joking quality too, a poking fun of, you know, why do I have to even do this darn ritual? And I think you're showing, you know, this legacy or this narrative legacy of the jokester. And it's a universal character, but as you're going to tell us more, it's a Jewish character too. So thank you for that question that came from Jerry Kaufman. Yeah, go ahead, please. My professor, no. Just my professor wrote a book on parodies, on Passover Agadas, Sephardic parodies, on Passover Agadas, Professor Eliezer Papo, and he wrote like a double volume book on these parodies, that in Passover, they wrote parodies about the Agadah built on the literary structure of the Agadah, and the Agadah itself also contains parodies which are quite direct, like the calculations of how many the plagues. Yeah, how many plagues did the Egyptian got? It's a parody. Well, all I can say is let's sign you up for next spring, right now. Sign you up right now for next spring. So quite a few people, myself included, noted the similarities of some of the Djoha's literalness means he doesn't understand anything.
Someone said similar to the stories of Helm. And then in the US context, there's wonderful children's books. Take note, you would love them. Amelia Bedelia, who is a maid, she's a shifcha, and she's such a literalist that when she's requested to do things by her employers, she completely misunderstands, to dress the chicken. And it teaches a lot about English language. Yeah. She actually puts clothes on the chicken, etc. So she's a Djoha figure, but she's female. So that leads me to the question, is Djoha always male?
Yes, Djoha is always male to my knowings, but he gets married, his wife has her own virtues, and his father is cheating on his mother, and his mother is cheating on his father. So the family is inherent, right. Including women, of course.
And someone asked, is there anything uniquely or specifically or distinctively Jewish about any of these stories? Do they always have parallels in the Arabic Yoha Nazer Darin stories? Yeah.
Okay, so the next story that we're going to read is going to be very Jewish. It's going to be very connected to the late antique stories that we considered as very strict. And it's a good example how humoristic they are. And I think that it will answer both questions, because some stories have, and I would bet that many stories have a Jewish version and a Muslim version. It's not so difficult to divert stories from one culture to another. If the story is good and interesting and funny, people will take it and make it their own story.
Okay, so the question then, a quick question, I know I'm so aware of the time. What's your understanding of the transmission culture here? Is this an oral tradition that can be transmitted in the context of a Muslim Iberia, or are there written texts that are in Arabic, and because the Jews living in Muslim lands know Judeo-Arabic, what's the transmission culture of these narrative stories?
Okay, so our first assumption is that all oral traditions, all folk traditions are firstly oral. Just like the Bible, just like the Babylonian Talmud, before they are written, they are oral. Okay, and stories like these, jokes in particular, are oral, because you tell a joke, we still tell a joke. And another thing is, when a joke is not funny, it will die, because you tell it. Okay, and if you read jokes that are not funny, they are preserved only partially. But yeah, it's mostly oral. In order to talk about is he first Arabic and then Jewish, people that are living in Egypt are living in an Arab culture, just as people that live in Germany are living in a Christian child. It's all mixed. Do we know that Herschel is specifically Jewish? Yeah, he has a Jewish name. I think that the strength of Djoha is that he can be Jewish, and most often he is Jewish, but sometimes he's Muslim.
So he's not a converso, but he's liminal.
He's so liminal. He's liminal. He's liminality himself. Yeah.
Great. Okay, so we have, we'll go on, and someone had another question, but we can, the audience or public should know that I keep a document on my other screen, which is why my eyes kind of go like this, and I keep the questions in the chat. So I hope I get to it. Okay, Dr. Lasry, I'm going to disappear like a joker and let you do your thing.
Okay, thank you, Professor Simkov. Okay, so I'll keep on sharing. I just want to, in order, I'm really happy about these questions. And in order to answer this question about the Jewish origins or the relation to humor in Jewish culture, in late antique Jewish culture, and the Jewish character of Djoha, I would like to tell this story about the patient teacher. One time, Djoha was returning from school with his friends, And while they were going back from school, they walked and they talked, and one of the kids said, this teacher that we have, he's so patient. I really love him. I adore him. He's so patient. And another kid said, he's amazing. He's never getting angry. I really love him. He's the best teacher ever. And Djoha hears that and said, you know what? I bet you that I can make him angry. You want to make him angry? His friends ask, yes, I'm going to make him angry, and I'm going to bet you 100 liras. Okay, lira, like this coin of the Ottoman Empire. I'm going to bet you 100 liras that he's going to get mad. Djoha, but you always win the bets. You always trick us. Let's say that if you lose, you pay us 100. And okay, says Djoha, I'll pay you 100 if I lose, but each one of you will pay me 100 liras if I win. So Djoha goes back and he thinks what to do. And in the middle of the night, 12 o'clock, he knocks on the teacher's door. The teacher gets dressed, goes downstairs, opens the door. Yes, Djoha, my dear, what did you want? What are you doing here at the middle of the night? Well, I just wanted to ask you, dear teacher, why do the French people have such long legs? You want to know why the French people have long legs? Yes. Okay, it's very simple. French people are tall, okay, and because of that, their legs are long. Yeah, this is the answer. It's a good thing that you came and asked me this question. Now you know. Okay, so have a nice evening, Djoha. I'll go back to sleep. And Djoha goes away, and the teacher goes to sleep, and he falls asleep. And 30 minutes later, knocks on the door. Djoha arrives again. Djoha, didn't you leave? We said good night. You have another question. Yes, dear teacher, I have another question. Why are the legs of the Japanese are so wide? I'll tell you, they have sands in their places, and then they developed wide feet in order for them to be comfortable and easy to walk on the sand. Okay, and that's it. Yes, that's it. And Djoha begins to cry. But because of you, and the teacher says, what, Djoha? Why are you crying? You wanted to know, you wanted to ask me questions. You asked me questions, and I answered. And it's the middle of the night, and everything is all right, Djoha. I'm not mad. Everything is fine. Because of you, I've lost 100 liras. Okay, so what I like about this story, I like many things about this story. And before I'm going to talk about this plot of the pupil that is trying to annoy the teacher and fails, doing so, I want to say that this story is actually based on a Talmudic story from tractate Shabbat from the Babylonian Talmud. In this story that some of you may know, this story is telling about Hillel. Two friends are betting a sum of money. The first that will make Hillel upset and angry will earn the money. So Hillel takes a shower. While he's taking the shower, they nag him and they ask him silly questions, just identical, almost silly questions about the feet and long legs and things of this kind of logic. And he answers, and he does not get upset because Hillel is so patient. Hillel is the perfect teacher. Hillel is not going to be annoyed about your questions ever. He's the perfect person that, has so much patience. And what I really like about it, it's almost the same story. The main difference is this is a story that the name that we have is Djoha. The second story from the Babylonian Talmud, we only have the name of Hillel. And in the story about Hillel, this is a story about a sage. This is a hagiographic story about a saint. And in our story about Djoha, it's a humoristic story about a fool. It's the same story, but the different context, the different names creates a different focalization When we focus on a fool, we see the fool. When we focus about the wise man, the patient man, we see the wise man. And this is in order just to reflect on what you asked about the Jewish origins. Yes, of course, the person that told this story, maybe he knew what he's doing, that he's adapting a story about Hillel, and maybe he didn't. That maybe he heard this story one time and he forgot that it was about Hillel. He decided to tell it about Djoha. Djoha is a magnet for stories, just like Elijah the prophet is a magnet for stories in the Babylonian Talmud. You have a story about a sage that miraculously saved a person, and then a few hundreds later you hear this exact story about Elijah. Djoha is a full magnet. Let's hear another story. It will be the last one that we're going to read. And Nancy, if I'm getting out of time, please.
No, I'm going to be careful. We're at 7:47. So yeah. You have a little bit of time. I'll jump in when you have to stop, okay?
Yeah, thank you very much. So I'll tell you this story quickly. Djoha is selling a house, but no one wants to buy from Djoha. Djoha is a cheat, and everyone knows it, and no one wants to do business with him. Then, eventually, a family that does not know Djoha and is new to town arrive, and they see that the house is nice, and they see that the price is half the price that one could expect from such a nice house, and they pay. And when they're signing the contract, Djoha tells him, you know what? Everything is good. The house is yours, and it's lovely, and it's half price. Half the price you would have paid 30 meters away. But I have one condition. This nail on the wall in the living room, this is a nail that it is a souvenir from my father. It is very dear to me, and this is mine. The nail in the living room is mine. The entire house is yours, but the nail, this is mine. So a couple of days go by, and Djoha enters the house surprisingly, and people do not realize what happens. And Djoha goes and hangs his coat on the nail. What are you doing, Djoha? Don't you remember? The house is yours. The nail is mine. It was hot. I hung my coat. Goes away. In the middle of the night, everyone are asleep. Djoha is storming in. Everyone awakes and are a bit afraid and puzzled. And Djoha, this is my coat. It got cold, so I came to take my coat. So he takes the coat and goes away. And a few days later, he goes at 2 o'clock in the night. He enters he storms into the house. I really miss my father. And the nail is the only thing, my only souvenir, my only memory from my father, and I wanted to remember. So here I am. So they got a bit frustrated, but a couple of lines later, Djoha enters again. In the middle of the noon, during lunch, he enters again, and then he takes a dead cat, and he hangs the dead cat on the nail. Djoha, why are you hanging a dead cat on the nail? Gentlemen, you signed a contract. The nail is mine. I can do whatever I want with this nail. So this is a dead cat. This is my nail. Lately, I got into economic difficulties. I have no money, and so I'm stuffing animals, and I'm going to stuff this cat. In a week or two, I'll be here and take him away. But until then, this cat is here on my nail. Remember, you signed the contract. And they are so frustrated that they are leaving the house and going away. And in that way, Djoha has the house, the money, and the nail. Okay. So here, Djoha is not innocent at all, because here Djoha is a trickster. And a trickster plays tricks. And just like Loki from Northern Scandinavian folklore, so does Djoha in Sephardic folklore can be very violent, very vicious. He can be bad and evil. And he's not limited to being a fool, and he changes his face, just like Janus's face. Sometimes he's a fool, and sometimes he's a vicious villain that uses people and play tricks on them. Because we have just a short amount of time, we'll go. I just really like Bob Dylan. He's a great folklorist of American folklore. And Bob Dylan has a great song called Joker Man. I assume that you know it. And when I'm listening to Bob Dylan for many years now, and when I listened again during this session, fixing or arranging this, working on this class of today, I saw that Bob Dylan is saying that in the song, the lyrics, friends to the martyr. And I was wondering, how does the Joker man is friends to the martyr, a friend to the woman of shame? Okay, what is the connection between the martyr and the trickster and the Joker man? And when we are talking about martyrs, we're talking about a kind of saint people. And I wanted to know what is the connection between the saint and the fool. And this is actually a thing that I've been considering for the last couple of years, the connection between the fool and the connection between the fool and the saint. And if you remember, when we talked about the saint, we talked about stories that cover his life. From before he was born to after he's dead, and we're talking about his offsprings and his belongings. So we have many stories about the saint. And we have stories about the saint in many stations of his life. It's not just one story. So when we're talking about early modernity, it is a long cycle of tenths of stories. So in that sense, if we look at the context on the book written by Matilda Cohen-Serrano, we can see that Djoha, we have stories about Djoha from his childhood, from his family when he's an adult, when he is working, from the market, we have many stations, and we have a circle of stories of Djoha's life. And I think that the similarity is our need of the Joker. Just as we need the saint, we have someone to look up to. We also need the Joker. We also need the trickster. We also need the fool. And it is amazing because not many characters have such a circle of stories about the life, their life. Because sometimes people just need a couple of stories on this character and a couple of stories about that character. But when we are dealing with saints and with fools, we are dealing with long cycles of stories, with many, many stories that are being told on this character. And I thought that it is quite intriguing. I don't have the solution. I would really love to hear what you're thinking. This is the last slide in this mini course. We talked about the saint, and we just talked about the connection between the saint and the Joker, and we found some similarities between the saint and the Joker. Last session, we talked about the ways in which our hero, Queen Esther, is also connected to the saint because he was the saint of the Conversos. And in that sense, we're looking at three different heroes: the fool, the queen, and the Joker. Sorry, the fool, the queen, and the saint, that are echoing different needs and different perspectives of the ways in which Jewish Sephardic folklore is functioning in the lives of the people. And I think that I'm going to stop here. I really want to thank you. It was a really great experience being here, and this hospitality is wonderful. And thank you for your warm feedbacks, and it was really nice. Professor Sinkov.
So, Ron, thank you so much. So a couple of little questions, and then I'll sort of ask a question I hope to sum up a little bit. So someone said, and I think it may not be an etymology that makes exact sense, but the joker and Djoha are most likely the same word. The chet pronounced as hey, H, and drop the R at the end. So Djoha, joker, in the English cognate, is there a relationship between these two words, or is this a...
Not to my understanding. We're talking about an Arabic word or a Turkish word and an English word. We need some, I'm not a philologist of language.
Okay, this is a question for Professor Rensburg, who is a philologist, who loves nothing better than drawing these connections, so maybe we can ask him that. And someone said someone had a question, is Lazarillo de Torres, Djoha character?
Lazarillo de Torres is another character. Is great. You know, we're talking about a trickster, about a character from 15th century Spain. And Lazarillo is a poor kid that is he tricks people, he tricks the priest, and he tricks the merchant, and he tricks the old man that buys him as a servant. And he always take his situation into his adventures. He's a picaresque figure. And for that, he's also a trickster. But we're talking now not about folklore, but now we're talking about prose. Lazarillo de Tormes is one of the main prose works of Spanish origin that comes before Don Quixote. This is one of the classic works that, it's very connected because he acts like a trickster constantly, and in that he also destabilizes roles of society. The priest is not more important than you, the old man is not more important than you, and you have an equal right to be not to be hungry.
So I have a question about, and this will kind of close with this. I think one of the slides showed a very contemporary, like modern Israeli children's book, right? With Djoha stories.
Yeah, it was like, I didn't write the translation. It was stories about, and I tried to make it shorter, stories about Hillel HaZaken, stories about Hillel the Elder of Dvor Omer, which is a very known, was a very known children writer. Right.
So my question is, this is sort of punting from the medieval period, but to what degree, I think, someone in the chat talked about Chelm, right? So the Joker tradition is Ashkenazi. Chelm is a real place, but becomes this, fictive place of fools, of the Nals, right, in Yiddish. And I'm curious, in contemporary Israel, given who you are and where you sit, to what degree is are the Djoha narratives still consigned, if you will, to Sephardim, to the Mizrahi communities, or is there crossover in this folkloristic tradition? And the same thing with the stories of Chelm. So, are these two great civilizations of Jewish culture and their folkloristic traditions remaining separate? Or do you see in your own life a more intersectional or mixing of these traditions?
Okay, so first of all, Chelm, it's pronounced in Hebrew Chelem, and I assume that you have a Yiddish pronunciation that hides behind these two pronunciations in English and then in Hebrew. Chelm, okay, so that's Makeda is the city of fools in Sephardic folklore. I didn't want to make it any longer, or
Next time, you're not going away so fast.
Yeah, I would be happy to come back. So when we're talking about Israeli culture, I think that the Israeli culture, as kids, you get both. You get the Chelm stories and Hershele's stories are very popular, and you also get the stories about Djoha and Makeda. But because of Israel, the history of Israel, as a child, I knew stories about Herschel before I knew stories about Djoha, because the Israeli society was very Eurocentric in its forming stages. And for that, more of these books were translated and printed and so on and so forth. But now you can really, Djoha is a very popular figure because a singer, very famous singer, that is from, his family is from Yemen. He's Israeli, of course, but he's telling on YouTube a joke about Djoha. Ron Shoval is a great singer. He's telling a joke about Djoha, and you hear that it is his folklore, but it is also his crowd folklore, which comes from many different other places. And I think that these characters are connecting because Herschel is the same. Herschel can be Poland, and it can be Russia, and it can be, there are no
right,
borders.
but he's not. But Herschel is not Sephardi.
No, these cultures live separately. They met.
So, Dr. Lasry, thank you so much. What a wonderful way to end. It's good in these very dark times to have something uplifting and funny and light, which is, I personally want to thank you for that. I kind of need this, I need this lightness a little bit right now. So to our community of our audience, thank you so much for tuning in to this wonderful three-part mini course. Again, tonight's lecture talk will be posted. You can share it with other people. Please do. I want to remind you that this ends our formal programming for this semester. But tomorrow night in person, the Bildner Center is co-sponsoring what will be a marvelous, I can guarantee it to you, you can take wage bets on it from me, a concert called Exile, Music of the Early Modern Jewish Diaspora. It is being performed with period instruments by our colleague Rebecca Sipis at the Mason Gross School of the Arts, and it will shed light on the powerful role played by Jews in the musical life during the volatile period of early modern Italy. So I urge you to come to Mason Gross. And if for some reason some of our listeners are listening on the other side of the Hudson, you know that at the Center for Jewish History on April 7th, the next day, Thursday night, the concert is being performed. So if you're not if you're New Jersey based, come tomorrow to Mason Gross. And if you're New York City based or Queens or something like this, please come. In Manhattan, you do need to register. I want to thank the Bildner staff, without whom nothing would happen. Nothing would happen. And the support of the Bildner Center is essential to bringing this kind of very high level, very sophisticated academic and intellectual programs to you. Karen Small, the managing director, Jenny Gurman, the senior department administrator, Darcy Marr, the communications coordinator, and Gabriel Duke, the events assistant. Really, I can't emphasize it enough. They work indefatigably. They make everything possible. They make sure things go off without a hitch. If there are any hitches, it's my fault. Blame me. And again, I want to tell Dr. Lasry that it's been an utter pleasure having him here at Rutgers. I'm glad we have you for a couple more weeks. And thank you so much for this marvelous course. To everyone else, stay healthy, stay safe. If you're preparing for the holiday of Passover, my sympathies to you, but I hope it's a meaningful holiday for you. Thank you and good night.